economically idle upper class, with the upper class governing through authority, like a vertical relationship. In the industrial society, by contrast, there is a functional division of labor. If you want, it's a horizontal stratification, at least according to Spencer, where the individual slots in this division of labor are basically determined by talent, at least in the best of all worlds, where the specialized professions in that system then are linked through a system of contracts that is horizontal arrangements, not vertical arrangements, where basically equal partners agree on exchanging goods and not, for instance, vertically stratified leaders extracting goods from the lower strata. These two societies also differ in a normative ontological sense here in how they are structured. So namely, whether the, let's say, collective entities have privileges over individuals, or whether it's the other way around, or whether they are top-down structured versus bottom-up. The militant society here is just a holistically structured society where the state primes over individuals. In the industrial society, it's the individuals that may also self-organize and form corporations, right? Like the East India Company would be one, and ultimately then only use the state in order to defend their individual rights in the ideal case. The economic system in these two societies obviously differs very much. The militant society just uses the economy for reasons of subsistence, and is a centrally planning kind of society. The industrial society, based on commerce, trade, uses then private property relations as main institutions in the society, and not central planning. Is there welfare in these two societies? Yes, but of different kinds. There's a kind of military welfare state in the militant society, where there's a certain redistribution based on also military achievement. If you want, just a footnote here, some of the modern states may also be described as having militant elements, right? And military welfare society is sometimes also a term that is used to describe the United States of the later 20th century. End of the footnote. In the industrial society, by contrast, at least as Herbert Spencer depicted here, there's not much of a welfare state. So it's a potentially more unequal society, so not sort of similar combatant soldiers. I mean, Spencer mentions communism already, but rather as something that should be avoided. So what is the state of this two-phase model? I mean, in Max Weber's term, we would probably describe this as ideal types that Spencer describes. That is, they only approximate a real type description, but in this pure state, as described by Spencer, then never realized. And Spencer is also known for being somewhat of the inventor of a social evolution theory, that is, thinking about societies in terms of a biological evolution. And I think it's not even clear that it was Spencer who stole the idea of evolution from biology, or whether it's biology that stole it from Spencer, but it's probably fair to say that Spencer vastly popularized evolutionary thinking in as applied to societies. So Spencer thinks also about these two types You might have seen this also in the use of these somehow also normative terms as primitive and more civilized, etc. As an evolutionary sequence where the militant society at one point being in competition also with the industrial society and its sort of utopias collapses automatically into the industrial society. And for Spencer, a main mechanism that drives this collapse into the modern era, if you want, is also overpopulation, where the subsistent economy of the militant society is not able to feed anymore, to provide the means for rising population numbers. Yeah, evolutionary theory itself is probably rather a descriptive theory, but can be also interpreted as a normative theory. And it's probably fair to say again that Spencer does not only think about industrial society as the type of society that comes later, but also as the one that is normatively better. Yeah. So how would Spencer measure whether it's better or worse? Spencer, as many of his liberal colleagues in the 19th century, defended some kind of utilitarianism, that is a philosophical, ethical idea that says that you might have heard this from Jeremy Bentham, who inspired both John Stuart Mill and Spencer, that says that societies should be about maximizing happiness of the many. Yeah? This would be one type of utilitarianism that focuses on happiness as the subject matter to be maximized, and that uses the maximization principle, and that uses the many, right, as sort of the utility subjects. And all of these different slots in the theory can be filled with different concepts, right? What is happiness? Should it be pleasure? Should there be certain also rights to exercise freedoms? And this is where Spencer's utilitarianism is a little bit special. Spencer thought that utilitarianism should also be about, in a way, maximizing certain human rights to the basic freedoms. And this utilitarianism then is the normative ground on which Spencer would say that a commercial industrial society is ethically also better than a militant society. Okay, just a little digression here on an important aspect of this ambiguity about also evolutionary theory being perhaps both a normative and a descriptive theory. So there's something that is sometimes attributed to Spencer, but probably wrongly so. It's definitely mentioned by David Hume, who was a teacher of and friend of Adam Smith in the 18th century. That's referred to as the is-ought problem. You might have heard it, or you might have heard it as the so-called naturalistic fallacy. The naturalistic fallacy is basically an invalid argument that uses purely descriptive statements, that use is kind of the copular being, as here in the first sentence, for instance, the first premise, and that use this as a premise in order to arrive at a normative conclusion that contains an ought statement of some kind, as in the example here, such that if I read this argument here, normally women in their 60s are not childbearing, and therefore, hence, they ought not to be childbearing. Yeah, you notice already, like when I read it in the sequence, that there's something missing, and that this is a fallacy in the sense that it's just not following, right? It's not a valid argument. There's something missing. And this is similar here in the second example, which is if you want a certain application of evolutionary theory applied to organizations. Yeah? So normally consumer organizations do not survive organizational problems, and hence they ought not be surviving. Yeah? Again, something seems to be missing here. Why should, from the mere fact that something is not surviving, follow that they ought not to be around? Right. And it's basically this is-ought fallacy that was first revealed by Hume, and which would basically say implicitly that using evolutionary theory in the social sciences to get at a normative statement about what's supposed to survive and what should not survive is basically having huge logical problems here of being valid arguments. So what to do about this? Well, first of all, you could make it a valid argument and the fallacy would be gone. So what you do is you add another premise to this argument, which fills this gap between the is and the ought. So here in the second example, for instance, this premise would read, well, whatever is factually the case and not surviving empirically, right, on a factual level, should also not be an ethical option. And only if this is the case, is it valid to have the conclusion that these organizations should not be surviving. So this is a very easy solution to the naturalistic fallacy. And you notice then also that the fallacy is less about being a logical problem. It moves into the space of disagreements about whether the second normative hypothesis here is ethically justifiable or not. Yeah. So in the first example, for instance, many of us would probably doubt that it's justified to say that whatever is statistically or biologically normal should be the ethical norm. Yeah? So, I mean, we will get to this in the gender theory part, but the distinction between sex and gender is an obvious attack of this second hypothesis, which is basically claiming a kind of biological determinism of our ethical norms. This is, I think, an important background information, because many of the theories in the social sciences have both, let's say, a normative and a descriptive component. But it's important to keep in mind that there's something like